Okay, welcome everybody to today's webinar, Automotive Marketing in a Mobile World, New Strategies to Drive Leads and Sales. My name is Blair Symes. I'm the Director of Content Marketing here at DialogueTech. And a quick couple notes about housekeeping before we get started. So we've got a full agenda, and if you want to tweet about the webinar as it's going on or afterwards, please use the hashtag #MobileAdsAuto. You'll see at the top of your screen now, and it should be at the bottom of your screen on all future slides. There will be a recording of this webinar, and if you've registered for it, which all of you have, you'll receive an email from me, usually within 24 hours, with a link to watch the recording or share it with colleagues or peers if you wish. At the end of the webinar, there should be some time to answer some live Q&A. So if you have questions, there's a chat box to your bottom left, so please use that and we'll get to as many questions as we can. And any questions we don't get to, we'll happily respond to those via email. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce our presenters. So I've already covered who I am, but joining me is my colleague Nate Morrissey, who's the Enterprise Business Development Manager here at DialogueTech. If you're not familiar with DialogueTech, we are the leading call attribution platform for not just auto, but for basically every major industry. Nate's got a ton of experience working directly with OEM and dealerships to help them attribute and optimize call conversions from their website. So also joining me is our special guest, Roger Barnett, who's the president of IgnitionOne. If you're not familiar with IgnitionOne, it's a company that provides deeper insights for marketers through scoring and integrated marketing solutions. IgnitionOne's also a partner of DialogueTech. So to begin, I'd like to set the stage with a couple slides showing some recent data and trends on the automotive buyer's journey and how mobile plays such an important role. First, I found these really interesting. Last year, Facebook came up with some data on the left. You can see about when people begin the car shopping or auto shopping journey, 60% of them aren't sure which car to buy. Most of them, over 60%, also start researching 6 months prior to purchase, and by the time they get down to 1 month prior, they usually narrow their choice down to 1 or 2 vehicles. So why this is important is that marketers have a tremendous opportunity early on to influence the car buying journey. You can see the stat to the right. A study shows that digital ads, including search engine ads, but also display ads and Facebook ads, 3 topics we'll be covering today, are 3 of the major ways that the automotive marketers can influence these undecided market of shoppers. So then it's no surprise why automotive digital advertising is one of the major ways that marketers are advertising. So you can see this recent stat from eMarketer that shows that in the U.S., automotive is actually the 2nd biggest industry in terms of digital ad spending. Last year, automotive marketers spent over $7 billion. And if you look over on 2020, that number is expected to almost double to over $14 billion. So the takeaway here is digital marketing is extremely important for automotive. Most automotive marketers know it, and it's becoming extremely competitive. So you do need the right strategies around advertising, around attribution and optimization, and we're going to cover some of those in today's webinar. Specifically around mobile. So what is the impact of mobile on the vehicle buyer's journey? Again, more stats that show that most people, 4 to 5 shoppers today, do use their smartphones at some point during the automotive research and purchasing process. And 25 to 30% of those people only use their smartphones. So it's a significant and growing number of people that your digital advertising, it'll only reach them if you're targeting specifically mobile devices and smartphones. You can see some stats in the middle demographically about some numbers for different groups. The bottom stat I find really interesting, and it's something that you can read a lot about if you follow automotive marketing, is that many people, 63% of auto shoppers, will research and shop online on their smartphones while they are actually on the dealership's lot. So there is an opportunity there as well for how marketers can take advantage of those searches, and we'll cover that a little bit later. So here's just some stats that back up the idea that digital advertising is going mobile. So you can see how today the three major channels we'll be talking about today, how across all industries, 63% of search ad spending will be mobile this year. Over 80% of Facebook ad spending will be mobile, and nearly 70% of display ad spending will be targeting mobile devices. So if you weren't convinced that mobile is the future of digital advertising, I hope these stats will do a good job doing that. So lastly, before I hand it over to Roger, I wanted to at least cover some of the trends we're seeing in terms of conversions from digital advertising. So as digital advertising is going mobile and people are accessing your advertising and visiting your website on their smartphones, the result is often a phone call. So you can see how only phone calls are 25% of people are converting by calling the dealership before visiting. That's second only to people who show up unannounced via walk-ins. So as you're optimizing your digital advertising, you definitely want to take phone calls into consideration. There are more people, it's bigger than email, chat, text, social media combined. So we'll get into more of that, and Nate will help me out later discussing what you can do to attribute those calls. Roger, why don't you take it away and talk a little bit about Facebook and display advertising?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Blair. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get your potential customers from that initial point of consideration to actually calling a dealership, and finally to purchasing a car. The consideration phase is so critical to get the right message to the user, to lead them down that path that's going to lead them to your vehicle. And in starting a campaign, there's no better place to start than Facebook because of some of the unique targeting and advertising capabilities in that platform. Facebook is obviously a massive platform, over 1 billion users worldwide. Interestingly, 30% of their users use mobile exclusively. And combining that with the stats of the growing number of people that are using mobile as their exclusive experience across purchase consideration for goods, Facebook becomes a very powerful platform. And if you combine the scale of Facebook with some things that are unique to Facebook that they offer in terms of very seamless cross-device targeting because of the login nature of their platform, and Facebook custom audiences, which you can combine with unique first-party data, or something like score-powered audiences, and we'll talk about that later. Facebook can and should be a core part of your campaigns. So when you take Facebook and you combine it with mobile-specific opportunities, you can really hyper-target those messages to make sure you send a customer down the path to purchase your vehicle. Let's say, for example, that you are able to create audiences, and you are able to do this, create audiences based on the kind of apps that a potential customer has downloaded on their website. And let's think of how this could be useful. Let's say that you want to promote a family and pet-friendly SUV. Well, you can create an audience for mobile devices that only target users that have apps that are related to perhaps early childhood learning apps, or perhaps apps that track canine health, those types of apps. Combine those into a large audience pool, and then show them ads that are very specific to cars that can meet the needs of the entire family. That's the kind of targeting that you can do using Facebook and Facebook custom audiences, and certainly across devices. And and you could take that database on mobile and actually use that same data on Facebook because of the cross-device capabilities to target those users on their desktop based on the apps they have on their mobile device. Getting specific and a little deeper in the auto vertical, and while we're talking about the consideration phase in particular, which Facebook is so good at for the types of high consideration purchase items like automobiles. Let's use an example of finding users on Facebook that have self-declared interest in environmental issues. Perhaps you can target folks who are interested in environmental issues but also have a career in something that requires heavy lifting, perhaps requires a pickup truck. And finally, retarget, let's say for example you're Ford, you could retarget people who have been to the Ford website. So here's an example of an ad that talks about how Ford uses aluminum and how they recycle aluminum. And this obviously would hit very specifically that demographic that you're going after here, but even perhaps would go after and interest some folks who otherwise might not be interested in a pickup truck. There are multiple ways to show ads on Facebook as well, not just static display ads. There are carousel ads. There are ads that have one-touch calling. So in this case it would be call the dealership now. There's video ads. And again, these things can also be targeted very specifically. So for a video ad, the one on the right is an ad about a video about glamping. Let's call it glamour camping. You can target this ad specifically to females in their mid-20s who are single, or you could target it to young families who might have small kids that want to go camping but need an easy experience. Those are the type of specificity that you can have on these ads. And clearly anything with call now is really going to help get the right message to the right users. Now Facebook is a great place to start because of the scale and because of the ease of cross-device targeting, but obviously getting to broader display ads across to all mobile users is really important. And so it takes just a little bit more work though to have the same types of targeting that's capable on Facebook. 4 out of 5 consumers use a smartphone during the purchase consideration process today. It's an astounding number, having been, to see how that number has changed in the last decade from 0 to 5 to 4 to 5. Smartphones have only been out about 10 years, less than 10 years. So it's a sea change in consumer behavior, and I think marketing is lagging behind that sea change. And so one of the reasons we're here today is to talk about how, as marketers, you can catch up to that. There's over 200 million unique mobile users in the U.S. alone, $100 billion globally spent in mobile advertising, and I still think that's less than the share of voice that should be spent on mobile based on how mobile devices are being used today. So it's an amazing platform with tons of scale. How do we use that platform to our advantage beyond Facebook and across all of the other apps and websites you might be visiting? So let's talk about how we can do cross-device targeting on Facebook and on display, and how that might be leveraged. It's really critical for lots of reasons. Primarily because the phone is used as part of the purchase journey, but not the entire purchase journey, especially for, again, high consideration items like automobiles. You'll look at the phone when you're watching your kid's soccer game, or you're on the bus, or you have a break, or you're bored in the middle of a meeting at work. You might research something, but you're probably going to make an appointment with the dealership for a test drive on your desktop, or more likely on that phone call. So how do we make sure we're giving, again, the right message to move the user further down the purchase path? It becomes critical. And there are multiple ways to get the right message based on the context of where you are in the purchase funnel and the device you're using. And most importantly, the type of car and the type of, whether it's an informational ad or a call to action. One thing to keep in mind too is when you're showing the ads, to use extensions for ease of use for the step that you want the customer to take. So in this ad, you're seeing visit us online. So this is a small snippet talking about some particular Chevrolet automobiles at a particular dealership. Click on this button right now to find out more details of vehicles available at this dealership. But using context is really critical in the types of things that are afforded by the information you get when somebody is on their mobile device. If somebody is in their car and mobile, and you're showing them an ad, show them an extension to say, click here to get directions to our dealership. If they're at their home or at their office, give them an extension to say, click here to call the dealership right now and schedule an appointment. If they are early in the purchase consideration process, they're probably not likely to want to drive there or call. Give them this link right here that says, go to our website and find out more information. All of these types of things you can do contextually and in a very relevant way that augments the user experience and makes them more likely to want to buy a car from you. And of course you need to make your messaging on mobile devices, across all devices, but mobile in particular, very relevant. Because ads on mobile take up a disproportionately large percentage of the screen. If you're looking at these examples here, let's look at the one on the left, which is ESPN's website on a mobile device. That it's really important to have an ad that seems not intrusive and seems to be adding to the content. And of course this is ESPN, so here's an ad for a Chevrolet truck that says getting ready for game day and talking about tailgating is very relevant, sports related. Obviously an ad, but not one that's kind of jarringly different in the type of content they're using and already looking at. So be sure to make messages relevant, make the right calls to action based on context, use all the data that's afforded to you by the unique nature of the mobile devices, and certainly use Facebook, make it a core part of what you're doing, but go beyond Facebook across display as well.
Great, thanks Roger. So I wanted to cover similar tips and do a deep dive into strategies to drive leads, dealership visits, and sales using mobile search. So honestly, one way to lift your mobile search conversions is to take some of those techniques and strategies that Roger mentioned and do a good job with your display and Facebook advertising. There are studies that show that while people who are exposed to your display and Facebook advertising might not convert directly on those particular ads, those ads will have a cumulative effect and influence how they run their searches. So you can see on the left that a study shows that 27% of people who are exposed to a brand's display ad will want to search for that specific brand. And when they do, they're almost 69% will actually convert that way. So Facebook has a similar stat with different numbers, but the idea is that you can use display and Facebook advertising to drive those conversions and influence those conversions via search. So when we're talking about mobile search advertising for automotive specifically, Google recently released this new ad format, which I think was really interesting. So it's called the AdWords Mobile Automotive Ads, specifically for OEMs, and it's a way for people who search on the name of a model to see almost like a showroom type experience visually, where they can swipe through all these different images of the car, the interior, and get really a much more visual and graphic idea. So when someone is starting to look for which models might be interesting to them, these ads are a great way to do that. And you can see some of the ways that they drive conversions below. So you can click on and visit the official Tier 1 site. You can build your own model. So a lot of people want to go on and customize and build the right features for that model. You can do that with a direct link. Or if you click on the dealer's link at the bottom or scroll all the way to the end, you'll see what's on the right, and that's a list of nearby dealerships for that specific brand. And there's a way, that way they can make a phone call to those dealerships or see directions directly to visit. So we touched a little bit on phone calls, and we're going to talk a little bit more later, but I wanted to make sure that it's very important that when you're running advertising, automotive advertising on AdWords or Bing or any search engine, you definitely should take advantage of call extensions. So we already talked about how 33% of shoppers who are using mobile devices will call a dealership directly. 60% of those shoppers would use a call button if it were available in a search ad. So instead of having somebody have to click on your ad and go and visit your mobile site and look for a phone number, they can make that call directly from your search ad. So you should make it convenient for them to do that with call extensions. And what's interesting is that there's a study that shows that even if they don't call you, if your ad does have a call extension, people are 8% more likely to still click on that ad and visit your site. So just having the call extension is a great way to actually increase click-through rates from your ad. So a couple trends I wanted to talk about for automotive specifically that you can target using mobile. The first are price searches. So we showed before that format you can use if someone's starting to learn about what model they're interested in. But once they have a model, the often next step is to look up what the price is for that vehicle. So you can see at the top how searches for MSRP and list prices are today at their highest levels. They've grown over 25% last year, and most of those searches, 70%, are happening on smartphones and mobile devices. So when you're creating ad campaigns for search, think about targeting MSRP and price-related keywords, including some of those inside your ad copy. I would also adjust those bids for mobile devices. So you're able to bid up or down based on the device that the ad is targeting. I would definitely bid up for searches on mobile because those are where people are looking for this particular information. And of course, make sure you're using relevant mobile-friendly site links. So you can see the site links at the bottom of this ad, the 4 links there. Make sure that they direct to a mobile-optimized page, and make sure that some of the options you include would be, search the dealership inventory, for example, or build and price are great options for somebody who's looking specifically for pricing information for a vehicle. The second trend is dealership searches. So searches for car dealerships near me have doubled in the past year, and 80% of those searches are happening on mobile devices. So in order for you to take advantage and get that traffic and that interest, you can use for Google what's called nearby business ads, and you can see those formats below. So someone searches for a specific dealership near them. All the ads that have location extensions enabled can show up here with call to action being the directions link or the call extension. So make sure that you have location extensions enabled in your advertising so you can capture some of this traffic. I touched on the idea that people are running searches on their smartphones while on the dealership lot. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into some tips to take advantage of this traffic. So on the left, you'll see the top reasons why people are likely to run these searches. The first is to compare prices for vehicles at other dealerships. So they're on your lot and they see your price and they want to see if it's competitive, so they want to do a search for dealers near them to see pricing for that specific model. The other idea is that they might have walked onto your lot and they want to do a search for prices for your dealership. And the third would be to compare inventory at other dealerships. So you can see some options for how to take advantage of this. The first thing is to run geo-targeted ads for your dealership, which means that you can enable these ads to be shown specifically around the perimeter or nearby your dealership. And also consider running ads like this for your competitors' dealerships. So the technique here is to try to get people who run your competitors' lot running searches for pricing for other dealerships. Make sure your ads are front and center and put a call button in there so that they'll be able to call you directly and talk to one of your sales agents, and maybe you can persuade them to come visit your dealership instead. Use messaging that emphasizes savings and inventory. So make sure that people who are looking for pricing, make sure they can see some of that information up front, that you've got a great selection, that you've got great savings and deals. Make sure some of those links and language is visible in your advertising. And again, use the nearby business ads we talked about. So make it easy for them to see that your dealership is close, and make it easy for them to call you and talk to you so you can try to persuade them to come visit your dealership before they make a purchase on a competitor's lot. In terms of targeting strategies, I touched on the geo-targeting right before, but there are two more that I think are extremely relevant, not just for search advertising, but also for display and for Facebook advertising that Roger was talking about. The first is remarketing. So this is the idea that if someone visits your website and either performs or doesn't perform a certain action, you can target those people when they run searches for whatever keywords you wish. So for example, if someone visits a page for a specific model on an OEM website, make sure that your ad, you can probably infer that those people are an interested, engaged shopper. Make sure your search ads pop up and bid more for that traffic. Or if somebody either called you or didn't call you from your website but are not yet a customer, you can also bid differently and target those people with specific language, specific keywords, specific bid strategies and pricing. So make sure that you take advantage of the people visiting your site and really create campaigns to target them. The other idea is customer match. So this is something that originated with Facebook, but recently, within the past year, Google and Yahoo for search have adopted this. And this is the idea that you can use someone's contact information, their email addresses, for example, and upload those into Facebook or into Google so that when those people run a search, you can target them specifically. So perhaps if someone filled out a form to contact a dealership, they didn't make a purchase, you can upload that list and target specific language, specific ads and calls to action that fit that specific criteria. Or perhaps you want to do this for service. So if you already have a list of your customers, whenever they're starting to search for a particular service, you can make sure that your ads show up front and center and bid higher for those specific people. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least remind everyone to make sure you optimize your web pages, your mobile web pages, but also your desktop pages to drive phone calls. So if you haven't learned anything from my part of this, it's that phone calls are extremely important in the customer journey in auto, and make sure that you're making it easy for people to call the dealerships. So from the OEM website, make sure in your located dealer page that you've got those phone numbers that people can call you directly. The example on the left for Nissan is great. The one for Porsche in the middle, they do have that phone number, but it's not clickable. So you'd have to literally pull up your keypad and type in that number. So make sure your phone numbers are clickable. And I would also say make sure they're attributable, which Nate will cover in a little bit. But as well, if you're a dealership and you've got your dealership website, this is fairly prominent now, but make sure you've got those call buttons for sales and for service prominently listed on every single page. The three things that you should measure beyond the obvious, which is click-through rates and any kind of online web form leads you're generating, are make sure that you're attributing your search ads and getting credit for conversions that happen across devices. So if somebody clicks on an ad on one device but ends up converting on a different device, whether it's their desktop or their smartphone or their tablet, make sure that you can get some credit and insight into how that's happening so you understand that your ad is driving not just a click but a conversion. And AdWords enables that with the estimated cross-device conversions, which you can turn on and get a sense for people who are interacting with one ad but converting through another. In-store visits, of course, is really interesting. AdWords really has some interesting technology that helps you estimate how people who have run searches and clicked on your ads have then visited your dealership. So extremely interesting stats. It's not an exact science, but it's fairly accurate in terms of just overall numbers of how your ads are driving actual traffic to the lot. And lastly, phone calls, of course. Nate will cover a bit more of this, but you should make sure that you're attributing your phone calls specifically to all the keywords, ads, and campaigns, not just in AdWords, but across Facebook and display and all of your other digital channels. So with that, I'll hand it back over to my colleague Nate, who will talk a little bit about optimizing and attributing call conversions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Blair. So just to start off, we want to talk about the importance of calls to both the OEM and the dealership. So if you think about it, the digital has kind of screwed up the power dynamic with the dealerships and the the consumer. So before digital, a consumer had to, maybe they looked in a newspaper, they would go to a dealership. The dealership had all of the information. Models, pricing, all of that was controlled by a dealership. Now with digital, the consumer has a majority of the control. Where before they even walk onto the lot, they probably know what the dealership had paid for the car. So consumers are researching. They research, I think they said earlier, starting up to 6 months before. But when they're ready to go and they're ready to start looking at cars, a phone call is one of the biggest conversion points, the second biggest conversion point for the consumer. So 25% of car buyers' first connections with a dealership is over the phone. That's almost a quarter of the conversions taking place. That is a quarter, excuse me. This is only going to continue to increase as well as more and more people are doing their research online. Cars.com had a study that came out where it said 80% of car buyers research using their phone. Of people who use their mobile devices, a third of them end up calling the dealership. So it's significantly higher for a mobile consumer. That's why that call, having the call extensions, having the phone number clickable are so important. Surprisingly, a lot of the OEMs today aren't tracking calls from their Tier 1 and Tier 2 websites. For the ones that we've partnered with, they've been able to double the number of dealer connections that they're able to track. When they don't track calls, what can happen is, I do all my research online, I click on your ads, I'm spending all this money, I call, there's no way to tie that offline activity back to the online advertising sources and consumer journeys that you guys are all tracking today. So if you're not tracking web forms, you could be missing half of the dealer connections that you're actually generating. So the way that call tracking works and why it's important. So if someone starts, they click on a digital ad. So let's say I'm on Facebook, I see an ad for a GMC. I click on that GMC ad, I come over to the website. When call tracking should allow you to see which channels, the keywords, the websites, the referral sites, the affiliate sites that are driving phone calls to your dealerships and to your dealership. And then what this will allow you to do then is to optimize what's working, spend more on ads that are working, obviously cut ads that aren't driving phone calls or web forms, and then just really have a holistic attribution model taking into account both web forms as well as the offline conversions that take place over the phone. So with call attribution software, the way that this works is what we do is we use a JavaScript-based application called SourceTrack, and we dynamically change the phone number at the individual user level. So sometimes you'll hear it called keyword tracking, you'll hear it called user tracking, you'll hear it called session level tracking. All of this is tying the phone call conversion back to that specific consumer. The advantages of doing this, obviously, are that it allows you to get, at a user level, allows you to track not only the ads that brought them there, but the consumer experience that led up to that phone call. So it's important when you're considering a call tracking provider that you're able to track calls from any source where you're spending ad dollars, and then being able to tie that through the website to the call that's ultimately placed. Now just a little bit about our work within the automotive space. We're currently working with 5 OEMs at the Tier 1 and Tier 2 level. We're working with hundreds of dealerships at the Tier 3 level. Before we started, they had no idea or really placed any value on the phone calls. They didn't think that they were happening. We've been able to prove just the opposite of that. With one of our OEMs, they're tracking almost 40,000 phone calls to their 1,400 dealerships. The close rate on those, 15% of those calls ended up purchasing a new vehicle. So not only do you drive a huge volume of phone calls, those phone calls close at or better than the web forms and the other online ways that people are connecting with your dealerships. For another luxury OEM, we're tracking over 2,000 phone calls to their 150 dealerships. We're also working with a UK-based OEM to help them as well in the UK. So when you're thinking about user-level tracking, it gives digital marketers a lot of power and information that helps them not only optimize their media, but also optimize the site experience. So first off, we help you understand what was it that drove the call. So what was the digital ad? Was it a specific keyword? Was it a referral site? We help you to understand which website did they arrive on. So was it the Tier 1 site, the brand site? Was it a regional site that they were working with? And then we also are able to track which page the person actually converted on. So was it a dealer locator? Was it a configuration page? Was it an inventory page? This is really important, especially when you start to tie that to the actual outcome. And did this consumer purchase a car? So what you're able to do then is reverse engineer that whole process where I see these are my people who bought cars. What percentage of them were using a dealer locator versus a inventory page? Did they start on a Tier 1 site and did they finish on a dealer site? Did they start on Tier 1 and convert on Tier 1? It's really important that you're tracking not only that an activity took place, but also that what they did that led up to that activity. So once the call takes place and we've changed the number, basically what we do with that call is we forward it to the number that we replaced. This does a couple of things. So first, it doesn't interfere with any call tracking that the dealer may be doing for the Tier 1 site. And then we also have the ability to programmatically listen to that call and understand specific keywords that were mentioned. Caller intent, was an appointment set, were they calling about a specific model? So it's important to also understand what's happening on those phone calls. More importantly is that you actually get that consumer to a salesperson and to the right department. So when we forward that, we have sophisticated routing capabilities where we can route based off of the specific model that person was looking at. We can route it based off of the time of day. We even have the capability to route, if they've called previously, to route that back to the same dealership. So there's a lot of call handling that can take place as well to ensure that you're giving the consumer the best possible experience. So ultimately, what we do is we really help, I think, three groups in the digital space and in the mobile marketing space. The first piece is your marketing team. Suddenly you're going to have 50% more conversion data with which to optimize your campaigns. For companies who have been doing this for 10 years, you may have it finely tuned at this point for your web form conversions. If that person clicks on that ad and this ad, there's a 90% chance they're going to end up filling out a web form. But without call data, you don't have the ability to also include and optimize for those conversions. We help the analytics team as well because they've got quite a bit more information. On the website side, this is where we've had a huge impact. So you're able to see that customer journey and how consumers are using the site. So which pages are they arriving on, which pages are they converting on, and which parts of those sites actually drive sales. So by understanding, my dealer locator page is driving, a lot of service calls, or my configuration page is driving a lot of sales calls, I can then either make numbers more prominent, I can move numbers, I can add numbers, or remove numbers if I know it's not driving the right type of call. Last but not least are really the brand teams and kind of the people who have to work with the dealerships. For dealerships, it's really important that the OEM is supporting them. So when you look at dealer satisfaction ratings, if they're selling a ton of cars, they tend to have pretty good dealer satisfaction. This is a quick win to help you improve those relations, because suddenly you can say, hey, I'm driving you 200 calls a month, in addition to the 50 web form leads that you're accustomed to handling. So overall, this data helps marketers across the board: the website, the marketing team, as well as those people who have to interface with the dealers on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Thanks, Nate. Let's hand it back to Roger to talk a little bit about IgnitionOne as well.
Yeah, happy to talk more about what we provide on a score-powered basis. And we talked before about how Facebook targeting is really powerful, especially combined with unique first-party data about what users are actually doing on your websites. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that right now. IgnitionOne has a proprietary user score that we calculate based on activity on your website. And so we can track and estimate where a user is in the purchase funnel based on how often they've come to your site, what they've done on your site, and the types of pages they look at. And we also can track what model they're most interested in. And so again, this helps target both how much the user is worth to you, how much you're willing to pay for an ad, and the type of ad that should be delivered to a customer. Let's look at this in real world. We ran what we're going to call a score-powered test. Well, it's not a test. This was a real live campaign for Toyota in the Netherlands. They had a very successful campaign running on Facebook using Facebook custom audiences. And we came to them and said, well, we already have scoring on your website, and I'll talk more about that in a second. We already have scoring on your website for website personalization. Why don't we create audience segments based on user score to better target your Facebook ads, and let's see what the performance is. So we did, and again, this was a Facebook campaign that Toyota in that market was already very happy with, and we were able to increase their conversion rates on the score-powered, score-targeted campaigns by 360%, and increase their click-through rate by almost 90%. So astounding performance improvements by getting better targeted creative and with the right messaging to the right users based on two things: where they are in the purchase funnel and the type of ad they would need to see based on the types of cars they're most interested in. I mentioned we already had scoring live on Toyota's site. We have website personalization features running on automobile OEM sites based on this user score for virtually every OEM in the world in at least one market, and usually across the globe. So it's not unlikely that that the auto manufacturer that you work for already has scoring on your OEM's website that we could potentially use to target your campaigns on Facebook and other types of media. So please reach out to us, and we'd love to target some of these campaigns and give you better performance and results. Thanks.
So thanks, Roger. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention that DialogueTech and IgnitionOne are partners, and you can use both of our platforms either separately or together. And the great value of what using them together is, as all the use case that Roger just mentioned, when you add DialogueTech to the picture, you're able to not just track and optimize on the online data, but also the call data as well. So all that data that Nate covered, you can import that important data for each of your digital channels into IgnitionOne from DialogueTech and really do some key and important optimizations for online and offline conversions. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and all my presenters. We're going to have we've got a bit of time to do some Q&A. But if you're interested in learning more about DialogueTech's call attribution platform, please visit our website and give us a call. We'd love to talk to you, as I'm sure would Roger and the IgnitionOne team. So please visit IgnitionOne.com to learn more about the IgnitionOne Digital Marketing Suite. So let me take a deep breath. We've got a bunch of questions here. I'm going to try my best to get through as many as we can in the time we have. So first question I've got is around tying digital campaigns to the offline, the in-store, in-dealership visit. So maybe I'll touch a little bit about that for search, and then hopefully Roger might be able to come in and talk about display and tracking that. So for search, there's actually I would encourage you just to run a quick Google search for how Google does that, because there's a specific algorithm that's really interesting they use. They don't tie, it's really based on location tracking on the person's smartphone, but the data they show is not so much like that this specific person ran this specific search and visited. It's more about an estimate of, this specific ad is generating this many. It's an aggregated number, but it's very supposedly it's very accurate, and they don't show it unless they have a high belief in the data. Roger, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the other channels in terms of tracking effectiveness of people who visit the dealership.
And I apologize, I missed the original question. You're just saying based on mobile devices, geofencing around the dealership and how to do that? Is that the question?
Well, it's more about, so the question here is, okay, after serving up a mobile display ad, how can I track the effectiveness of that in terms of who is actually going into the dealership?
Okay, but there's several ways to do that. There are third-party data sources that can geo-track, but usually that only happens when you can only effectively get the lat long of a phone at any given time if they're like looking at an ad within an app that you happen to have a data relationship with. So that is less impactful unless they're on one of your partner's apps. How we do this, and how we do this specifically for auto dealers, is through calls to actions on their website. So we work with OEMs globally, where we'll while they're researching or building a car online, we'll give them a call to action to say, hey, sign up now for a test drive, and tell us about yourself and when you want an appointment and the kind of car you're interested in buying. We'll take that information and push it into the car manufacturer's CRM system. It gets delivered to the dealer, and when the person arrives at the dealer, they know not only the car that they registered for, but other cars that they looked at while on the manufacturer's website, so they could have them ready and they can mention them if they're potential upsells. So that's how we tie together based on our site personalization product, and again, that's run on the same scoring that we talked about that can also drive your remarketing efforts across Facebook and others.
Yeah, perfect. I've got a question here about, I guess this is for maybe Nate, you can help me out with this one. It's a question, I'll just read it. Do DialogueTech's OEM customers get any pushback from their network of dealerships because you are showing a different phone number? So it's the idea that OEM sites, I imagine, have a bunch of different dealerships listed, or they show, because we show a dynamic phone number, is there any kind of pushback from when you deal with OEMs about this?
Yeah. This is a pretty common concern at the OEM, on the OEM side, is that, my dealerships are going to freak out if they see a number that's different than what their number that's listed is. Well, that's not a concern from the OEMs that we've gotten set up. So when they take this to their dealerships and position it as a way to optimize and drive more leads, ultimately more sales, generally the dealerships are pretty happy about that. In addition, most of the dealerships today are already doing call tracking. So it's just a matter of the OEM gaining feature parity with their dealerships. You wouldn't often think that an OEM would be lagging behind a dealership's website given the resources, but a lot of times that is the case when it comes to the phone call and the phone tracking component.
Okay, so since I've got you, there's a question that just came in that I thought was interesting. So how does call tracking work from a tier 1 to a visit to a dealership and eventual purchase? So this asker wants to know how come does attribution break when they move from one site to the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say I click on ad, I go to the tier 1 website, I pick up the phone and I call and set an appointment. We don't have a way to actually tell that the person when they walk in. Short of having someone in the store, that piece isn't there. What I can tell you is someone called, they scheduled an appointment, someone called and said they were going to be in the shop, they called about a specific piece, and then after the fact we take that call data and we match it to the CRM records to see who ultimately bought. And that's how we reverse engineer that. The walking in component, we don't have a way to connect that yet, but that's how we track from tier 1 to phone call to ultimately the sales outcome.
Okay. One more quick one. You probably answered this pretty quickly. Can you use call tracking or call attribution with affiliate sites like AutoTrader or Kelley's Blue Book?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things that you can do. For the actual listings on those sites, you can give them a tracking phone number that for the dealership where you assign a number to that specific source or to that specific listing. You can also set it up so that if someone clicks on a link and comes from there to your website, we can track that at the source level as well.
All right, great questions. Please keep them coming in. We've got a few more minutes. Here's one, Roger, maybe you can help us out with. So what if someone comes into a dealership without any past history in terms of an online identity? How can we build that out so we can message to them? Does that make sense?
Kind of. I guess the idea is if somebody comes into a dealership and leaves, and then how do you get back in front of that person to get them to come back in and make a purchase? If that's the question, it's very difficult without, again, tying together digital signature of some sort. If somebody comes into your dealership and they're leaving, it certainly you would need some sort of identification to get back in front of them. An email address would be a great place to start. If you can somehow send them to, hey, give me your email address and I'll send you special offers over email. Well, there's a lot that you can do with that email besides just them getting an email from you with a special deal. You can through Google and through Facebook custom audiences, you can actually send an email address to Facebook, and then you can, if that email address matches an account in Facebook, they can get ads from you specific for the types of cars that you want to show them, and you can drive them back to the dealer that way. Very similar on Google across both AdWords and Google Display Network. So that would probably be the easiest way to tie back for somebody just kind of walking in a lot. Unless you had an OEM or dealer specific app against which you could tie together a mobile device ID that you could get them to download. But I think that would be probably more difficult than just getting an email address before they leave if possible.
Perfect. I do have, this is a bit of a longer multi-step question, but I'll ask it because this attendee is very interested in us to ask it. So if I have more than one phone number on the site for different purposes or more than one website, would DialogueTech be able to provide unique phone numbers to the user? That's question one.
Here, I'll take that one. So Sabir, thanks for asking that one. It's a good question. The answer is yes. You can dynamically change multiple phone numbers on a site. You can do it with local numbers, 800 numbers, or toll-free numbers. We generally recommend as a best practice to match the area code or the type of number to make sure that you're giving that user a local experience, assuming it's a dealer site. So we'll see it a lot of times on a dealer site where they have a number for sales, a number for service, a number for parts. Whether they call the right number or not, I don't know. But we can dynamically change those numbers each, or we can dynamically change them to be the same number. A lot of times it just depends on the routing behind it, whether those numbers just get dumped into the same spot or if they actually get transferred to a service desk versus just a general answering service. How do you track calls that would lead to a sale? We do this by connecting call data and the session IDs to a CRM record. Generally, it's using name and address and caller ID. So we do this now with a few of our OEM partners, so they're actually able to track from add to purchase and then look backwards. So that's the best way to do it. We also work with some consortiums as well to help them where everybody shares their data. We're able to pass them the information for sales matchback. What other verticals do we work with besides automotive? It's really any vertical that's a considered purchase. So think about things like insurance. You think about things like mortgages, bank loans. What are some of the others? Healthcare. Any industry where you have you don't drop it into a shopping cart, because ultimately those are where I probably want to talk to someone. Like Amazon, maybe not the best opportunity, but you look at, going on vacation, buying a car, getting a house, insurance, financial services, those are the big ones.
Yeah, I would just add, in terms of scoring leads, I know we have a lot of digital agencies who are attending this webinar today. So if you're trying to prove the value of the marketing that you're doing for either the OEM or for a dealership, obviously being able to prove you're driving the calls is important. But you can also do some things around analyzing what happens on the call in order to prove importance. So one thing is you can look and see how long each call lasts. So in general, perhaps you can prove that your paid search advertising is generating a call where the conversation lasts 7 minutes or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And usually that length, it depends on the industry, but the longer the call, usually that's more indicative of a quality conversation, a quality sales lead. So yes, you're not tying it directly to a purchase, but you can also have some proof around the quality of the calls and that you're bringing in. You can also record the calls, listen to them if you want to do that. And DialogueTech actually has some really interesting technology around analyzing conversations. So you don't have to listen to calls, but you can run keyword searches through conversations to actually show which ones are showing terms like, say, the word test drive came up or appointment came up. You can see all the calls where that word was spoken, and then that might be a great way for you to prove the quality of the call.
Yeah, we've done some work with a large nationwide auto service organization where we're starting to look at what types of calls did they send. So they're running paid search ads for a specific type of product. They want to understand how many people who called actually talked about that product, whether it's tires or oil changes or so on and so forth. They're also looking at, are the franchises and are the dealerships actually answering the calls that they're sending them? It's amazing how much media waste there is when you start to track, hey, I sent you 15 calls, you only answered 10 of them, and we need to have a larger discussion about whether staffing or maybe we need to set up alternatives to route it to another area. So once you get into it, there's a lot of things that you can start to uncover about the business, not only the media piece, but how am I servicing those customers who are picking up the phone and calling?
So it looks like we're at the top of the hour. There's still a lot of great questions here, but I think we've run out of time. I want to respect the hour mark. So thank you, everybody, for attending. A special thank you to Roger from IgnitionOne, and obviously my coworker Nate for joining me on this webinar. I hope all of you found it interesting. Again, if you're interested in either DialogueTech or IgnitionOne, please visit our websites, give us a call, and we'll be happy to talk with you. So thank you. I'll be sending an email out with a link to the recording if you want to share it or watch it again. I know many of you have asked to see a copy of the slides. I'm happy to send you PDFs for the slides if you just reply to my email and request them. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.